You can start off, Prabhuji.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. So welcome all of you to this evening's Bhagavatam class. We'll be doing Canto 6, chapter 18, verse 39. So before that, we'll start with some Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanimitirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vinda Vaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Pancha Kalpataro Pescha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll share my screen. We'll pick on from Canto 6, chapter 18, verse 39. So please do let me know once you're able to see my screen. Please do let me know once you see my screen.
We can see, Prabhu, it's still showing a Zoom page.
Okay, one moment. Is this better now? Is it showing anything?
Yes, now we can see, Prabhuji.
Yeah, I'll just push this down so that we can. Yeah, I'll pick the 39th verse. Okay, so let's start. Aho artendriya ramo yoshin mayaya krihita chetakar kripanaha patisye narake dhruvam. Anybody wants to read the translation?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
Pranam.
Yes, please go ahead.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai. Kashyapa Muni thought, alas, I have now become too attached to material enjoyment. Taking advantage of this, my mind has been attracted by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a woman, my wife. Therefore, I am surely a wretched person who will glide down toward hell. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. So the background of this particular verse is that Dhriti wants to settle scores with Lord Indra, right? And she sees Indra's hand behind the killing of her two sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And she wants to, this time, approach Kashyapa Muni with the thought of first kind of pleasing him, and then extracting the boon of being able to be the reason behind the killing of Indra. So once Kashyapa Muni comes to know of this, there is a repentance which is happening, right? And he's alas, I fell prey for all this, and he is basically ruing for what has happened. And he also is ruing for the fact that all this is probably happening that because he's too attached materially, right? And therefore, such a boon he had to give, and therefore the repentance. So let's go to that. There's not much in terms of purport Srila Prabhupada has given, so we'll go to the next one. Kotikramo anuvartanya swabhavam iha yoshitah tinamam pata bhutam swarte yadaham tva ajitendriyah. Anybody? Saras Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Shri Prabhupada. This woman, my wife, has adopted a means that follows her nature, and therefore she is not to be blamed. But I am a man, therefore all condemnation upon me. I am not at all conversant with what is good for me, since I could not control my senses. Purport shall I read, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
The natural instinct of a woman is to enjoy the material world. She induces her husband to enjoy this world by satisfying his tongue, belly, and genitals, which are called Dihva, Udara, and Upasta. A woman is expert in cooking palatable dishes so that she can easily satisfy her husband in eating. When one eats nicely, his belly is satisfied, and as soon as the belly is satisfied, the genitals become strong. Especially when a man is accustomed to eating meat and drinking wine and similar passionate things, he certainly becomes sexually inclined. It should be understood that sexual inclinations are meant not for spiritual progress, but for gliding down to hell. Thus, Kashyapa Muni considered his situation and lamented. In other words, to be a householder is very risky unless one is trained and the wife is a follower of her husband. The husband should be trained at the very beginning of his life. Kaumara Acharet Pragno Dharman Bhagavatan Iha. Bhagavatam 7.6.1. During the time of brahmacharya or student life, a brahmacharya should be taught to be expert in Bhagavata Dharma, devotional service. Then, when he marries, if his wife is faithful to her husband and follows him in such life, the relationship between husband and wife is very desirable. However, a relationship between husband and wife without spiritual consciousness, but strictly for sense gratification, is not at all good. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.2.3 that especially in this age, Kali Yuga, Dampatye Viruchir Hetuhu. The relationship between husband and wife will be based on sexual power. Therefore, householder life in this Kali Yuga is extremely dangerous unless both the wife and the husband take to Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Saraswataji. So it's a very deep purport Srila Prabhupada has given. Now, there are ways to understand this. I wanted to take your attention to one of the verses and stop my sharing and then reshare again. I wanted to share one shloka from Nectar of Instructions. 1 second. I'll stop my share and then reshare. Just a minute. Can I stop sharing? Okay, yeah. Very good. I'll just give me a second. I'll share one more shloka. Sorry. Yeah, one moment. I'll share again. Please do let me know once you share. It's in my screen. Yeah. Yeah. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes. So if you, the first shloka, Jiva Udara and Upastha, there's a very beautiful verse coming from Rupa Goswami. It says, Vacho vegam manasakrodha vegam, Jibba vegam udarapastha vegam, Etan vegan so yo vishaheta tiraha, Sarvam apimam Prithvim sashishyat. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So here, it's basically a mention of, it's not just that, a person has to be sannyasi in being able to control all these parts, these aspects. If you consider even in our day-to-day dealings, many times utterance of a wrong word or, saying something in the wrong tone can actually upset relationships. And once something, vacho vegam, which is the urge to speak, is quite prevalent, quite dominant. You go to any discussion, people are more than eager to speak than to hear, right? And there is no, and the urges to control tongue is absolutely not there, and belly is not there, and therefore it has an impact on genitals also. So what we eat, is what we become. And there are medical studies also that prove that someone who is essentially a meat eater continues to be driven by mode of passion, right? And someone who takes sattvic food becomes a sattvic person also, because what you eat, you become. Because that's the consciousness the person who's cooking the food or who's preparing the food is carrying, and that rubs on to the consumer. So if we consider the whole aspect of the urge to speak, it's quite dominant. Now, if we go to any particular, if anyone steps out, it's very difficult to control tongue. There are a lot of delicacies that offer. But again, we need to ensure that we always take Krishna Prasad and we, as much as possible, stay away from outside food. Now that will help cleanse our consciousness. Now, why is that important? Why? What's the connection of food with belly and genitals and speaking and other bits? Because the more we get into the mode of sattva, right, the better we become in terms of being a person, a good person. And then our spiritual upliftment is also guaranteed. So the other bit to also take care of here is that if we tend to, if we tend to breach these principles, we get astray and mind will play a havoc and we'll easily fall prey to mind's dictation. So this is one of the verses which relates back to the first line. Now, there's also mention that, mention on the householder in general, right? And how risky it is. Now, why is it said that it's risky? Because what typically, I'll take your attention to one of the things that probably happened a couple of decades back. And, there was a mention of basically India's population census that was taken a few decades back. And there was a mention that there is no other forms of recreation. That was one of the reasons why the population was growing. Now, that predominantly happens because there's no way to dovetail the mind into something which is of higher purpose. And when mind is not dovetailed into higher purpose, if something doesn't rise up, it only flows down, right? It only goes down. So we need to remember that principle that at every instant, we are not uplifting our consciousness is only going down. It's so, you can think of it this way, that the consciousness follows the law of gravity. So unless you make the effort to take it up, the natural tendency is to decline. So from that perspective, a householder, and there's a mention in Bhagavatam that a woman is compared to the fire, and a man is compared to as a cotton. And it's very important that if the lifestyle of the householder, both husband and wife put together, is not dovetailed towards Krishna consciousness, it essentially becomes a fulfillment of all material desires, right? And I'm not saying that fulfilling your material desires is not important, or it's not healthy, not that way, but discriminating what is needed versus what is absolutely optional. That intelligence has to be there. So therefore, a relationship between husband and wife without spiritual consciousness, but strictly for sense gratification, is not at all good, right? Now, one of the mention about dampatya, which is mentioned here, is that one is taking company, or a man is taking company of a woman, and a woman is taking company of a man, to essentially follow the path of dharma, to uplift their consciousness together, right? To produce children who can serve Krishna well. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is the intent to have children is essentially to have souls who can apply or who can follow Krishna consciousness as a way of life. So essentially, man and woman together are joint partners in terms of basically following the path of dharma, and essentially moving, and that dharma can be easily followed if we apply Krishna consciousness as a way of applying the dharma, right? Because Krishna consciousness easily allows us to apply the dharma. For example, the 4 regulative principles, right? Now that's ingrained as part of Krishna consciousness. Once we follow that, most of the verses in dharma, they get ticked off. You're checking on all the boxes, right? And it's not that we follow all these 4 regulative principles it's not like it's an absolute denial. It's only that what we're saying is that it needs to be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness way. So for example, we like to eat some delicacy, right? Now offer that to Krishna. Of course, the higher purpose could be going forward is that that we essentially subjugate our tongue and our senses to exactly what Krishna desires, right? Initially, we may start off saying that I may like to eat a particular delicacy, but I may want to offer that and then have it. But once we get tenured in Krishna consciousness, we'll be happy with simple food also, right? Right now, for anybody, it's going to be a challenge. So at least those desires can be dovetailed in a Krishna conscious way. And for example, the aspect of gambling is anyway decried even by the society. Basically intoxication, again, that is decried. Now meat eating, anyway, we don't do. And gambling, meat eating, no illicit sex, basically. So essentially, when we apply the lens of Krishna consciousness, the man is for the woman, woman is for the man, right? And that is a monogamic relationship. And that automatically aligns with no illicit sex, right? So these principles get easily followed. The aspects of dharma is easily followed when we take to Krishna consciousness. Now, there's also a mention of Srimad Bhagavatam 12.2.3. See, I might have opened it already. Yeah. So there's another mention here. Dampatye abhiruchir hetu mayava vyavaharike stritve pumstve chahiratir vipratve sutram evahi Men and women will live together merely because of superficial attraction, and success is dependent in business will depend on deceit. Womanliness and manliness will be judged according to one's expertise in sex, and a man will be known as a Brahmana just by wearing a thread, just by his wearing a thread. So you see all the definitions have reduced, right? Now, there is frequently in society, you'll see a big manifestation of these first two lines in what we call today famously as live-in relationships, right? Where a man and woman's association has become so transactional, right? A man will live with a woman will live with a man for as long as they desire, and then they will move on. They may change partners. They may marry someone eventually completely differently, right? So all these aspects, though they get followed in society, they are completely decried by Vedas. In Vedas, there is always a mention of one marriage, and that too happens, with the consent of elders. Right? That's what is approved in Vedas. So as we move away from Vedas in our day-to-day life, in the name of liberalization, in the name of modernization, in the name of free speech, freedom of expression of all sorts, we will fall down more and more, and our minds will never be aligned towards a higher purpose. Our minds will never go towards reading Shastras, trying to see what's there. What is it that I should achieve as part of this human life? All those questions will go begging, and we will never make any progress. And we will give in to all the way the society gets run today, just by choices of individuals rather than by any discipline. Right? So that's the bit which I wanted to cover as part of any questions. I know these are very heavy verses, but it's very important to sometimes go through these bitter messages so that we essentially keep our consciousness pure. Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
When you came to this gambling and all that, business itself is a gamble, right?
Can you explain that, Mataji?
Right, they lie, the prices, they are not honest with the prices. And also what about stock exchange? All those things, in business, it counts. So what do you have to say about that, Prabhuji? Just to know, just for my knowledge.
No. Very, very valid question, and a very tricky one also. Because
Yes.
what happens in society, it's very the thread of distinction between gambling and sane business is very, very thin. Right? It's a very tight rope that we walk. Now, I can talk for people who have spoken on this subject, right? And one thing that I heard from one of our senior devotees in one forum is that particularly if you are looking to, let's say, we are all trying to maximize our return on investment, right? And all of us understand that some of the safe channels of investment, such as fixed deposits, they don't yield much returns. They may not help us beat inflation. And we really look at money as money that can be used in Krishna service. So it cannot erode over a period of time, right? From that perspective, one of the things that I've heard, particularly since you mentioned about stock exchange, is that what is mentioned is if you're trying to invest with your intellect, right, and not really deceit in terms of insider trading or access to information which can get you unfair advantage, but something where you have applied a lens of intelligence where you looked at company fundamentals, you've done technical research, you've done all those bits, right? You've done all your due diligence, and it is purely based on intellect that you feel that you're compelled to invest in a particular stock. That may be fine, that may be okay. But if there are a lot of people who do futures and options, and which are like highly kind of a huge betting is involved. And another lens that we can look at, especially in stock market and other, is that if any decision makes you highly anxious, your heart is pumping when you're making the decision, I think it's better to stay away, right? As long as I mean, it's investing with intelligence, and you're staying away from complete betting. That could be one lens to be used. Salome Mataji, I think you have your hands up. Did it clarify, Padma Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes.
Yes, Salome
Thank you.
Mataji. No.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I
Yes,
was
ma'am.
also pondering the gambling in that. And then, I was just thinking about the Isha Vasyam concept. If we are speculating, and if it's because we want to buy more houses, more cars, greedy and whatever, then we are breaching the Isha Vasyam principle. Whereas if we are just doing it, just to make enough for living, or you make enough for whatever, then I think it should be okay. But when the
Yes,
greed sets in, and
correct.
and your conscience is not right, because it's you want to make so much of money that you want to buy additional houses and companies and what, then it's wrong. It
Correct.
depends what you are doing it for.
Yes, absolutely
I
spot on.
don't know. I'm just asking, Prabhuji.
No. You're spot on, Mataji, in your analysis. Absolutely. See, it's also famously said, in this world, there is enough for everyone's need, but there's not enough for everyone's greed, right? And that is essentially the principle of Ishavashya Idam Sarvam. Now, what we definitely see, since we are all, many of us are Grahasthas here, it is important to preserve for what we think is a justified money to make our ends meet, right? Without putting us in a lot of anxiety, without getting into gambling and other illicit forms of gathering money, right? So, as Mataji rightly pointed out, that we need to understand, and it's a very tough, assessment to make, that what is it which is justified and good for me. Now, in many cases, what people do to get that question answered is, depending on how transparent you are with your superiors, they can help you guide, because it's not one principle that holds for all. It's not that way, because it depends on family needs. Some may have more children, some may have elders in the family for whom they may have to preserve. So it depends. Every family has a unique situation. So better to consult some of the superiors and who can help with a sound advice. But then we need to also realize that, is this additional source of income taking me away from Krishna consciousness? Is it bringing me closer to Krishna? Am I spending that additional 1 or 2 hours consulting, doing some freelancing, which could have been completely optional, right? Is it coming into my bhakti time? Is it coming in my exclusive time with Krishna? Is it hampering my seva? So if you ask some of these questions in generating additional sources of income, most of it will get clarified, right? If you put Krishna's principle as a mainstay of your decision making, you mostly will make the right decision. In most cases, you will make. And in whichever case you have some doubt, better to consult, because every situation is unique, every person is unique. Right? So that's the bit. And does it help answer, Salome Mataji?
Prabhuji, what I heard was in some lecture, they said, somebody asked a question and they said, in business, I mean, business you can't do without lying. Business sab chalta hai, it's okay. That's why I asked you this question, Prabhuji.
Correct. So, again, it depends on, it's for devotees, couple of professions. I'll just give an example, which becomes very difficult. Is like, if someone is in the business of, let's say, movie making, right? Or someone is in the business of, say, any business which will allow certain deceit to happen. One has to use his judgment before getting in. For example, I'll give another example. What if someone joins a company which is in the business of breweries, right? They are just supplying, or they are in tobacco business. So certain things we'll have to use the lens of discrimination. Though that particular business or job may give you a lot more money. But honestly, asking, many devotees who have chosen to stay away from such businesses, they have spent more relishing time in Krishna consciousness. And also, in many cases, they have been extremely materially successful also. So it's not that, and if I give another example, which is more closer to heart, is let's say if you look at India's ecosystem in general. Now, the companies that have flourished the most, I'll give an example of Tata's, because it rhymes with everyone. Now, the culture of Tata is always built on the values of ethics and moral values and higher principles, right? And even today,
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
all the companies, every company that they have diversified into has been extremely successful, right? They have done business with fair play and they have succeeded. So sometimes even investors, they see the values that you bring into the table. You're doing ethical business, you're doing with moral values, and you may not get immediate results, but when you endure with that kind of those values, over a period of time, you'll find a lot of money flowing in, because people always want to be invested with trusted partners, right? So yeah, that's my take on this, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. So let's keep going. Let me see, where was I? In 40th. We covered this, right? So in 41st. Sarat Padmotsavam Paktram Vachascha Shravanamritam Hridayam Kshura Dharabam Trinam Ko Veda Cheshtitam. Anybody wants to? Yes, Krishnamurti Prabhu, please go ahead.
Translation by Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes,
Translation by A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Prabhupada ki jai.
Yes, Prabhu. Please go ahead.
A woman's face is an attractive and beautiful as a blossoming lotus flower during autumn. Her words are very sweet and they give pleasure to the ear, but if we study a woman's heart, we can understand it to be extremely sharp, like the blade of a razor. In these circumstances, who could understand the dealings of a woman? Shall I read purport, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhu. I mean, Sudha Mataji, you want to read the purport?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila
Sorry,
Prabhupada.
Prabhu. Sorry, Krishnamurti Prabhu. Since Mataji had raised, I had to just make sure. I hope you're okay.
By all means, Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you so much. Please go ahead, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Woman is now depicted very well from the materialistic point of view by Kashyapa Muni. Women are generally known as the fair sex, and especially in youth at the age of 16 or 17, women are very attractive to men. Therefore, a woman's face is compared to a blooming lotus flower in autumn. Just as a lotus is extremely beautiful in autumn, a woman at the threshold of youthful beauty is extremely attractive. In Sanskrit, a woman's voice is called Nari Swara because women generally sing and their singing is very attractive. At the present moment, cinema artists, especially female singers, they are especially welcome. Some of them earn fabulous amounts of money simply by singing. Therefore, as taught by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a woman's singing is dangerous because it can make a sannyasi fall a victim to the woman. Sannyasa means giving up the company of women, but if a sannyasi hears the voice of a woman and sees her beautiful face, he certainly becomes attracted and is sure to fall down. There have been many examples. Even the great sage Vishwamitra fell a victim to Menaka. Therefore, a person desiring to advance in spiritual consciousness must be especially careful not to see a woman's face or hear a woman's voice. To see a woman's face and appreciate its beauty, or to hear a woman's voice and appreciate her singing as very nice, is a subtle fall down for a brahmachari or sannyasi. Thus, the description of a woman's features
by Kashyapa Muni is very instructive. When a woman's bodily features are attractive, when her face is beautiful, and when her voice is sweet, she is naturally a trap for a man. The Shastras advise that when such a woman comes to serve a man, she should be considered to be like a dark well covered by grass. In the fields, there are many such wells, and a man who does not know about them drops through the grass and falls down. Thus, there are many such instructions. Since the attraction of the material world is based on attraction for women, Kashyapa Muni thought, under the circumstances, who can understand the heart of a woman? Chanakya Pandita has also advised, Vishwaso Naiva Kartavya Srishu Raja Kuleshu Cha. There are two persons one should not trust, a politician and a woman. These, of course, are authoritative Shastric injunctions, and we should therefore be very careful in our dealings with women. Sometimes our Krishna conscious movement is criticized for mingling men and women, but Krishna consciousness is meant for anyone. Whether one is a man or woman does not matter. Lord Krishna personally says, Striya Vaishyas Tata Shudras Te Piyanti Paramgatam. Whether one is a woman, Shudra or Vaishya, not to speak of being a Brahmana or Kshatriya, everyone is fit to return home back to Godhead if he strictly follows the instructions of the spiritual master and Shastra. We therefore request all the members of the Krishna conscious movement, both men and women, not to be attracted by bodily features, but only to be attracted by Krishna. Then everything will be all right. Otherwise, there will be danger. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. It's again a very heavy verse which talks about one important thing to note here is that this purport is been written with a mindset that, where Kashyapa Muni is ruining the decision that he made, and completely, if you look at the first three passages, right, rather the first two passages, there's a mention of woman's beauty, moon-like face, bodily features, nice voice, etc. We can very clearly see that all this description is at a material platform, right? On a day-to-day material mundane platform. And the last para, where it talks about mingling of men and women, which is there's no criticism for mingling of men and women in Krishna conscious movement, is because both men and women are operating in a spiritual platform. And when people are operating in spiritual platform, there is no bodily conception. Then it means there's only one Purusha, right? There's one Purusha, which is Krishna. He's the enjoyer, and everything else is enjoyable, right? He's the supreme enjoyer. So there's only one Purusha, everyone is Prakriti, other than Krishna, right? So when one looks at it from that perspective, then it doesn't matter man or a woman, it doesn't matter, because Krishna is enjoyer, and we are to be enjoyed by him, right? So there's only one enjoyer, and that is Krishna, right? So that is very clearly mentioned out here. The other important thing is that, which is also mentioned, is that not to be attracted by bodily features, of course, because we're going to be acting in spiritual platform. And the mention here also is that if we go to particularly lines, Striyo Vaishyas Tatha Shudras Te Yanti Param Gatim, whether irrespective of the sex status, a man, woman, or Varnashram status, Sudra, Vaishya, or Brahmana, Kshatriya, everyone is fit to go to home. In fact, we've also seen in passages of Bhagavatam that basically Gajendra, who's an animal, right, who's essentially an elephant, he also went back to Godhead, right, through his prayers. And his prayers are something which all the devotees read very joyfully, and they relish each of those verses. So Krishna's outreach is all inclusive. There's no discrimination, and everyone is as much entitled to go home back to Godhead as much as and it's irrespective of varnashram or status of gender. So that's another thing that is important to be clarified. And there is a mention in the Bhagavata Subodhini. I'll just read out that passage, which is very important to clarify. Which basically comes in passage 42, which we will read shortly after this. But it says, the natural instincts of a man, of a woman or a man are manifested only in the bodily conception of life, which is we saw in the first two paras. We should see all women as spiritual units whose only duty is to satisfy Krishna. Then one is not influenced by the material modes. Everyone should be interested in the activities of the spirit soul, not the body. The soul is sometimes described as Purusha due to the spirit of enjoying the material world, whether in the body of a man or a woman. Krishna consciousness, however, provides first-class training for a man or a woman. A man should be trained as a first-class devotee of Krishna, and a woman should be trained as a very chaste follower of her husband. Now, the reason why the last line says that chaste follower of her husband is because woman accrues all the good karmas of her husband very easily, just by enabling her husband in this particular case. And that's documented in Shastra that there is no need to do a special endeavor, right? And it naturally flows. And then there is also a mention which probably we will see in the next verse, which we'll spend some time in. Any questions before we move to the next verse? Is there a hand up? I'm not sure.
Krishna Prabhu,
Yes,
Kashyap had an experience earlier, no, Prabhu, but still he failed to see through.
Very wonderful question. So, if you look at the regret of Kashyapa Muni, alas, he says, right, I have again fallen in material platform. Alas, I fell victim. I have done it again, right? So basically that repentance is also a reflection of a mistake repeated. See, when do you repent a lot more? When that the mistake has been repeated again. Okay? Kashyapa Muni is a very elevated soul, someone who's got all the potency of a spiritualist. Now, there's a mention of there's also a mention of Vishwamitra, right? When he falls victim to Menaka. See, the forces of material nature are very, very strong, very, very strong. I mean, it's very difficult to overcome it, right? And Krishna has mentioned that the modes of material nature are very strong, but one who's surrendered onto me will find it easy to cross over. Now, what happens is that typically we fall prey when we are not thought about Krishna in that particular instant of time when we were performing that action. Be it, falling prey to sexual desires, or be it taking a decision in haste, or be it letting out our mind through harsh words. In any of these cases, you would always see one thing, that instant in time, somebody was not thinking about Krishna, right? And that is the whole movement of Krishna consciousness, where we bring Krishna in front and center of all the activities that we are doing, so that we don't fall prey to material nature. We don't fall prey to material modes. We don't fall prey to our own desires. We don't fall prey to our own senses. So that's the bit. Anybody, Vishwamitra Muni, we've seen, he's a Brahma Rishi, and then and in this case Kashyapa Muni, all these are elevated souls, but at certain instant in time they did fall prey to material desires, right? And that is what they're doing, right? Does it help clarify, Mataji?
Yes. And even Diti also, no, Prabhu, when she heard that she was going to get two demons, she withheld her pregnancy for hundreds of years for fear of. So I thought maybe she has become good, but still Please continue.
So, yeah, but a very important point to note here is, see, a mother, right, has always going to have a favorite, or she'll have a soft corner for her children, irrespective of children are demigods or demons. A mother will not differentiate from that perspective. A motherhood doesn't differentiate, a son being a devil or a god, or a demigod, not god, a demigod. Because for a mother, a son is a son or a daughter is a daughter, right? It just ends there. It's very natural for a mother to think from a perspective of, if someone loses his children to a certain force, all the enemy, all the there is a lot of turbulence of mind in terms of making sure that force is accounted for, right? That force gets taken care of. So it's essentially coming from motherhood that, my children are dead. If you look at Mahabharata, so there's this classic example of Gandhari, right? And when Gandhari loses all her 100 sons to Kurukshetra war, and Lord Krishna comes to meet her to give her solace, essentially, because he's also very cognizant of the fact that a mother has lost children, so she needs solace, she needs comforting by words. And when he comes there, as much as he tries to give solace to her, she curses him that eventually the Yadava dynasty will get vanquished, right? And it happens. And basically Krishna allows that to happen to, first thing, make sure that Gandhari's words don't fail. At the same time, he knows that his pastimes are done, and Gandhari's curse is essentially a very nice way, a good segue to end his pastimes and return back to the spiritual world. So that's how it unfolds. So does that help answer, Mataji?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move to the next one. Nahi kaschit priya strina anjasa swasi satmananam smatmanam patim putram prataramba gnantarte katayanti cha ghatayanti cha. Anybody wants to read? Hare Krishna. Anyone wants to read, or I'll read? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. Translation and purport of Srila Prabhupada, Jai Shri Prabhupada. To satisfy their own interests, women deal with men as if the men were most dear to them. But no one is actually dear to them. Women are supposed to be very saintly, but for their own interests, they can kill even their husbands, sons, or brothers, or cause them to be killed by others. Purport, shall I read, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji. Yeah, yes. I don't know whether anybody else raised their hand.
Purport.
Yes,
A
go
woman's
ahead,
nature has been particularly well studied by Kashyapa Muni. Women are self-interested by nature, and therefore they should be protected by all means so that their natural inclination to be too self-interested will not be manifested. Women need to be protected by men. A woman should be cared for by her father in her childhood, by her husband in her youth, and by her grown sons in her old age. This is the injunction of Manu, who says that a woman should not be given independence at any stage. Women must be cared for so that they will not be free to manifest their natural tendency for gross selfishness. There have been many cases, even in the present day, in which women have killed their husbands to take advantage of their insurance policies. This is not a criticism of women, but a practical study of their nature. Such natural instincts of a woman or a man are manifested only in the bodily conception of life. When either a man or a woman is advanced in spiritual consciousness, the bodily conception of life practically vanishes. We should see all women as spiritual units, Aham Brahmasmi, whose only duty is to satisfy Krishna. Then the influences of the different modes of material nature, which result from one's possessing the material body, will not act. The Krishna consciousness movement is so beneficial that it can very easily counteract the contamination of material nature, which results from one's possessing a material body. Bhagavad Gita therefore teaches in the very beginning that whether one is a man or a woman, one must know that he or she is not the body, but a spiritual soul. Everyone should be interested in the activities of the spirit soul, not the body. As long as one is activated by the bodily conception of life, there is always the danger of being misled, whether one is a man or a woman. The soul is sometimes described as Purusha because whether one is dressed as a man or a woman, one is inclined to enjoy this material world. One who has the spirit of enjoyment is described as Purusha. Whether one is a man or a woman, he is not interested in serving others. Everyone is interested in satisfying his or her own senses. Krishna consciousness, however, provides first-class training for a man or a woman. A man should be trained to be a first-class devotee of Lord Krishna, and a woman should be trained to be a very chaste follower of her husband. That will make the lives of both of them happy. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mataji. So a little bit of slight repeat of one passage which I read, which again comes from Prabhupada's purports only, where it's mentioned about certain aspects of women nature. Now, there's a mention here which says that women need to be protected by men at all stages, at childhood by her father, in her youth by her husband, and in her old age by her son. Now, few reflections on this. Now, why is it said that way? See, one thought is that, somebody may say woman is a weaker sex, so it's very difficult for her to keep the evil forces in the society at bay, which is definitely one valid argument. The other argument is that women are seen as the precious jewel in the house, right? Now, typically, the fame and prestige of a house is dictated by the whereabouts of a woman. Let's say there is a household where a woman's whereabouts are questionable. Now, the whole family, it doesn't matter, whether there are children, there are parents, there is a husband, their character or their attitude doesn't matter. If a woman in that house is not right, the whole reputation of the house is questioned, right? But if a woman sets an exemplary example in that household, irrespective of what others do in the household, the house earns itself a good name in the society. So women are like that precious jewel who need to be protected, right? And therefore, this injection which is mentioned. So that's one thing. And there's also a mention that, when in a soul form, right? When you look at body and soul separately, a soul is like Purusha, because soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Now, the material body has to be left behind, right? So the material body is basically given by Prakriti to us. So when the material body comes to a soul, he can take a woman or a man's body. And it's also mentioned that a woman is seen as someone who's enjoyed, right? So it's also fair to say, when as much as a man endeavors to enjoy a woman may endeavor to enjoy a man. It's reciprocal. It's not to put down their stature in the society in any which way. So the intent to capture here from this verse is that a woman needs to be protected, not just because she needs to be protected from evil forces of the society, but also because she's like the precious jewel who always needs to be nurtured and looked after. And also the fact that they are irrespective, man or a woman, they are Purusha, they are spiritual units, and they follow their natural constitutional position when they serve Krishna. Right? Jivera Swarupoy, Krishnera Nityadas. So that principle should never be forgotten, irrespective of material body forms that we may get in this birth or we may get in the next birth. This awakening that the natural constitutional position of a soul is to serve Krishna, that should remain. Any questions? Again, I know this is a bit heavy passage, but any questions?
Yes, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mataji.
Because over here, like they say that woman can go to any extent, to to fulfill her selfish motive. She can kill her husband also. But Prabhuji, although I agree to everything that has been written here, with all my respect, but now also no less, no Prabhuji, they also cheat and they also do such bad things. Why only a woman is always, brought into light?
Good question, Mataji. It's a very difficult question to answer, but I'll try to answer. See, one thing is that the fact that, as I mentioned, activities, in this society, you would have always seen activities. As I mentioned, this whole example of household, right, which is measured by whereabouts of a woman, right? I mentioned that she's the focus of attention because the eyes of the society are in her conduct, how she conducts herself in presence of a larger set of people in the society. So what happens is, if a woman is not has a questionable character, say for example, the whole focus of the family changes. Then the only talking point. Now let's assume that a man in the house is questionable. Now, what happens is, one thing is that the fact that a man sometimes it's not that it's appropriate for a man to behave that way. It's essentially the fact that the parameter or the barometer of the household is dictated by a woman, right? Even in a day-to-day operations of a family, you would see that many times a man consults woman, and most likely he will try to make her happy by following some of her desires or wishes, and therefore, if a woman's character is strong, she will be able to not just educate, but also give the right direction to a man in many cases, right? That's how our society is moving. Now, I'll give another example that there's a mention, in some of our scriptures, that a woman gets the benefit of man's good deeds. It's not vice versa. A woman will get the benefits of a man's good deeds, like a man performs all austerities, he performs yajna, puja, everything. A good share of that will go to the woman because she's enabling the man to perform all that. Assume a woman in the house is very adamant and she doesn't let the man do all of this. A man will not be able to do. But if a woman creates an environment, all this can happen. The second bit is that if a man is going astray, a woman has all the rights to essentially tell him and remind him of his duties, right? And a man will come back to proper alignment. And the third bit is also, a woman is seen as someone who's forbearing, someone who's got high tolerance, right? So typically, if someone moves away from that basic tenets of, because a woman is tolerant, a woman is much more she is forbearing, right? And that's why we call Mother Earth. We don't call Father Earth, right? This planet is called Mother Earth because this Earth can tolerate a lot of things that are happening on it, right? She is able to tolerate. Mother Earth is able to tolerate. So since a woman is forbearing and she can guide the man in the right way, and man basically, and since woman is also considered the most important, who dictates the character of a family. For these aspects, there's more focus on women than on man, right? In fact, I'll even go on to say that when any Agni Karyam needs to be done, and you would see that it's the woman who has to light up the Agni, right? Otherwise, a man by himself cannot do that. So a woman has to initiate. So she's seen as someone who triggers the right activity in a family, right? And which is more so seen as we advance more and more into Kali Yuga. So that's the focus. Any thoughts, Mataji? Does it?
Yes, Prabhu, although I agree with you fully, and with all my respect to scriptures, there are many instances where the women have been so good, very faithful wives, very good mothers, but the man acts as if he loves the woman so much, he loves the family, but until too late, they don't even discover that he has another woman. Many, I've come across so many, even in Krishna consciousness, come across some families where these things have been happening.
So the only thing I can say, Mataji, is that don't be surprised if you see it in devotee families also. The reason is, I think the way I have started to look at it is that it is not that when we started to take to Krishna consciousness that we have become, spiritual beings from day one, or we have attained a very high bar in our, in our dealings or in our day-to-day workings, basically. All of us are finally in a hospital. We are all getting our own treatment, and everybody reacts very differently to a treatment. Some people, the medicines work very fast. They recover fast and they make a rapid progress. Some people, the disease is so entrenched that it takes a lot more time to react. The medicine doesn't take effect that easy.
Yes.
Right. So we have to look at from that lens, Mataji, because if we start to if we look at people in very absolute terms, right? If we, to give an analogy, that if we look at everyone through percentages, an eye of percentage, that somebody got 35%, somebody got 95%. So 95%, someone who's got that, he's better person. No, not really, right? It doesn't mean that way. So, so from that perspective, that we have to just recognize the fact that all of us are getting troubled by these material modes. Everybody at any point will see, a fall, can see a fall, right? Potentially a fall. As much we stay guarded that all of us are going to be vulnerable to this material modes of nature. We may have situations when the material modes of nature will get better of us. The fact that we are still getting treated, all of us are patients in this large hospital, or all of us are prisoners serving a term. If we start to look at it from that lens, it's more reconciling. It starts to connect a lot more that it's possible. It's not that somebody has made a mistake, that he will continue to make mistakes. Somebody will have a repentance. Somebody will go through a transformation. And this is one place where there's a mention that I'm just forgetting, maybe, I'll probably try to give the substance of that verse that I have, that particular sentence that I remember. You should never ask a sage's past, right? And you should never ask a thief's future, because a sage may have had a troubled past, right? But he is reformed.
Yes.
And a thief who probably is not in the, is in the not in the right occupation, is detested by the society, may become a sage actually at some point.
Yeah.
So that's how we can reconcile, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for such questions. But
no, these are very, very important questions, Mataji, because it's a question that bothers everyone. That, when we see, in fact, I have also seen many devotees make mistakes. I've also seen people falling down. Now, that doesn't mean anything. In the sense, we have to recognize that these are the high-level principles at which we are playing.
yes. Thank you, Prabhuji. Dandat Pranam.
Thank you, Mataji, so much. So we'll end. I know we are about 7 minutes over time. If there are no further questions, I'll end the class with saying Jai Srila Prabhupada. And I am so happy that all of you could make time for this evening's class, covering 6.18.39 till 42. So I'll leave it to the next speaker. Thank you so much for your time and your patience. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Damdas Pranam Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much for the wonderful class.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Dandavad.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for a wonderful class.
Dandavad Mataji. Thank you so much.